Let's talk about the wide receivers. This is another big position of need for the Patriots. And as I understand it, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but as I
Yeah.
understand it, you were a little underwhelmed by this wide receiver group as a whole.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably fair. I think that there's a couple things. It depends again in a lot of ways. Like we were talking about with the tackles, it's a flavor thing. It just kind of depends on what sort of skill set you're looking for. I didn't really see anybody in this group that had like an all around skill set. I think there are a lot of nice little role players out of this wide receiver group in Mobile this year. If you want a slot guy, like you have Xavier Restrepo, right? You have Jalen Noel. You have some guys that are like in that mold. Maybe a Tez Johnson ends up playing more inside because of his size. If you want an outside guy, like I thought Jaden Higgins was the best receiver in Mobile this year. And I know Noel's gotten a lot of the pub, his teammate, but I think that he was the best to me because he really showed a translatable skill set to play on the outside. 6'4", 215 pounds. We talk about levels, days in terms of prospects. Like we always talk about Ted McMillan as being like this top 10 prospect. I would say Higgins has a lot of the same traits as Ted McMillan, just you're going to get him on day 2 instead of day 1. And those prospects are always intriguing to me because depending on the way the board falls and who the Patriots take at the top of the draft, you might not address wide receiver in that mold at the top of the draft with Ted. So maybe you go a little bit further down and you draft a guy like Jaden Higgins, who is 6'4", but moves like a smaller receiver, but can still win at the catch point. We saw that in the game on Saturday, that he can win through contact and win contested catches, but also has a little bit of route running ability and fluidity to his game to run routes. So I like him. I think he's a solid player. I'm trying my best, Alex, not to take the cheese on Tez Johnson. I understand what kind of player that was and what we were looking at in one-on-ones, and he's putting 6 moves on a guy and all that kind of stuff. I get that that's going to create a lot of separation, but we have seen some of those guys in that mold recently. Obviously, Tank Dell is probably the best one. And to your point, Tank Dell has not finished a season yet in the NFL, so durability matters. But there's no denying how good Tank Dell is when he's healthy. So I see Tez Johnson in a similar way. Like if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be productive. But that's a big if.
So I don't hate the idea of Tez Johnson like overall, but it 5'8", 156. He's not like he's a gadget player. And I think you can have success with that kind of player, but where he's projected right now, like as a fringe top 50 pick. And I just think the Patriots need a guy that's going to make more of a down to down impact. Like to
Yeah.
me, Tez Johnson, you talk about this a lot with it's kind of how you talk about running backs, right? Where it's, that guy is the cherry on top. That guy is the final piece you plug in and get you over the top. He's not really a foundational kind of player. And if you're a team, like where the Texans were, where they took Tank Dell, and we didn't know that they were that close, but like they had started to put a lot of offensive pieces together. I feel like the Patriots need guys that, if go tell me who day 3 Tez Johnson is, and I'm in.
Yeah.
And it might be Kyle Williams, who we saw there. It might be, there's one other guy I was looking at today. I don't remember who it was, but like there's a handful of guys that could be that guy, right? But I think what the Patriots need to get back to that foundational thing, and you mentioned Jaden Higgins, and this is where I struggle with Tez Johnson. We're not looking, we don't think the Patriots are looking for that like prototype X. They're not looking for the big outside guy. If Josh McDaniels is going to do what Josh McDaniels does, it's that Z slot, that high volume, 120 targets over the course of a season, live in that 8 to 12 yard range, slot receiver kind of guy. And there's durability you need with that. You need to be built a certain way for that role. There's more than one ways to do that, right? Julian Edelman, Jacoby Myers both had success in that role, different kinds of players. They got there differently, but the result was the same. I don't know that a guy like Tez Johnson has the tools to get there. When I look at Jaden Higgins, when I look at Jack Beck, who was the MVP of the game, who had an awesome week, like if they want to go the power slot like Myers, I wonder if those either of those guys are the guy, or are they more an outside receiver? Or then you go to Xavier Restrepo, who's maybe more like the Julian Edelman type. So who do you think? You just ran through a bunch of guys that maybe aren't fits, right?
Yeah.
Who did you see there that in terms of the skill set and the build can handle that 120 target role?
I think it comes down to three guys. You mentioned Restrepo, who, even though he's smaller, I think he's built like a running back. You know, he's got the girthy frame, a lot like a Julian Edelman. They're measurables. I think Edelman's like a little taller, but they're pretty similar in terms of like height, weight, and he's also pretty similar to like a guy like Khalil Shakir in Buffalo. Also, they're almost like running backs that play out of the slot, right? Like that's sort of the body type that you're looking at. So I think he could withstand it. I thought his best day was probably day 3 when they started working in the red zone. I didn't think he was a great on days 1 and 2, but I thought some of that with Restrepo is he was trying to win a lot on slot fades and show that he can win down the field. And I would have liked to have just seen a little bit more of that first and second level stuff, but I understand that he probably thinks that's on film, right? You can see me do that on film already. I didn't think that he separated great down the field. He doesn't have a ton of long speed or that second gear to separate over the top of a defensive over a defender. But if I had to go into that more like Jacoby Myers role, I think Noel's in that category from Iowa State. You know,
Noel or Higgins?
Noel. I think Higgins to me is more of an X. I think Higgins can play outside. We'll see what his 40 is. But I think he can play.
Noel's not like a big guy.
I think Noel is what, like 5'11", 5'10", 196. Yeah, I think
that'd be closer to Edelman than Myers.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right. I guess I thought he looked a little bit bigger than that watching him, but we can put him in that category. And then I also think we should mention Royals. Like I think Royals to me, and I can look up his measurables. 5'11", 210. So I guess we're a little bit closer to Jacoby Myers with that build, not quite as tall, right? I think Jacoby's like 6 feet, 6'1", but this 210 definitely stood out. And I actually thought watching Royals run routes, like just the foot quickness and the way he set up routes and things like that, gave me some Jacoby vibes. Like if I had to compare these receivers to past Patriots, like I would say Royals more like Jacoby Myers, Restrepo obviously in that Edelman, Amendola, Welker, type of mold. So it depends on what they want. I've found myself, and Edelman was, I think one of the things that separates Edelman is he was so scrappy, right? Like he was so physical and scrappy and willing to get into those hard areas. Not every slot receiver built like that is. And so I kind of gravitate towards maybe a little bit more size these days to be able to block and be able to hold your own in the run game and those types of things. I think Edelman was a rare breed. He was crazy. He was just kind of a little bit insane that he would just go in there at that size. So I liked all those guys in that role. But again, I think we're talking, to me at least, more about complementary receivers. Like I don't think any one of these guys I'm looking at and I'm saying this guy's going to be the engine of your offense. I think we're more talking about types and roles, maybe more closer to like a Danny Amendola than a Julian Edelman or a Wes Welker.